Hi, this video is the second of two videos. If you want to see the first, you can click this button or the first link in the description to go to it. But to summarize, I show the pattern between companies that everyone hates and intellectual property. Also, I explain why intellectual property fundamentally creates the potential for that consumer abuse. If you already think intellectual property is a necessary evil, you can skip the first one, but otherwise it's probably a smart idea to go back. This video is about how, despite this abuse, there are two main arguments used to justify it anyway. One says without IP there is an incentive for the creation of things that can be copied, and the other says that you have an ethical right to those things anyway, just like you would a car or a piece of jewelry. Thus, the general point of this video is to show how creators in a world without IP would still work and profit, and as we go along, I'll be pointing out the inconsistencies in the ethical argument. If you want to skip to that, go to this timestamp. But first, what you're probably here for is what's in the thumbnail. As part of proving my argument and putting my money where my mouth is, I've created Studio Hi-C and the first chapter of Airlock Bound, my very first original webcomic. And everything from me, this channel, and this studio is now public domain and presumably will forever be. So you can take anything I make, re-upload it, edit it, or make money off of it in whatever way you see fit. You don't even need to credit me. I have no control of my own work after it's released anymore, whether it be streaming, YouTube, or anything that comes out of my studio. Now that comes with a couple of interesting grey legal area questions, with things like stream gameplay. Am I allowed to make the whole thing public domain, or is it just my face and voice that's public domain, and then the owner of whatever I'm streaming can still sue people if they use the footage, or they use my footage? I don't know. Or like, if I buy the license to an image or use it transformatively as part of a video, is the whole video public domain so long as no one cuts out that individual copyright infringement? I don't know, it may be that I'll just have to go to court in future to get some of this stuff sorted out, but we'll see. At the very least, I can't sue you. That's the best guarantee I can make. And of course, the projects that are totally safe, totally black and white public domain will be clearly marked. The comic, of course, is one of them. However, I will note that at some point in future, I might make something copyleft instead of public domain, but that will be clearly marked as well. For those who don't know, copyleft is like public domain. Anyone can do anything with it, but if you use it, whatever you make will be copyleft too. Again, that will be clearly marked, and everything of mine, default, is public domain. So go check out my public domain webcomic. If you don't know, I'm the guy who did a couple of videos of critique-based fanfictions for Star Wars and Harry Potter, along with others, and achieved a pretty strong amount of success. Not sure how I'm gonna go with my own original characters and world building, might have some kinks to iron out, but you know, we'll see. And if you want me to continue writing, then you can support me on Patreon. Chapters won't start for 2 months while we finalize concept art for some characters and create a chapter buffer to keep our production line efficient, so if you want to wait till then, go for it, but if you support us now, I can raise the artist's pay straight away and also raise my own pay, because oh boy, I'm taking losses right now, baby. I don't know how many months I can do that for. I went back and forth on Patreon rewards, but for reasons I'll get into with the actual video, I decided against it because I wanted to prove that I can profit from the product itself, not from like thank you messages in the credits or anything else I could sell to backers. Because obviously current monetization models with intellectual property don't have to do that. For now, I'm just going to work with the product itself. That said, in future, I might start releasing the transparent line art behind a stretch goal. Again, to the reason why it's an exception in the video, but for the first chapter, I'm going to release all the transparent line art for free right now. So if you want to, for instance, do the whole motion manga thing you can find on YouTube, but for this comic, I just made it incredibly easy for you to render individual parts and give it that motion. And best part is, unlike motion manga, this is public domain. I can't DMCA you and you can make full profits. You don't even need to credit me, but hey, if you like the sound of that arrangement, maybe direct your viewers to my Patreon anyway, because I won't be able to make future chapters for you unless I'm making money too. Also, if you want to see me take on a bunch of other projects, including a horror genre roguelike inspired by Binding of Isaac, and a public domain code and assets that can be made to work as a Minecraft mod, designed to integrate block building, exploration, mechanics, and PvP into each other so they work dynamically, those are stretch goals you can fund too. But I'll be advertising them more in future. Also, I'm streaming fairly regularly now, so come check me out. I'm doing Pirates of the West charity live streams, the Animated Dormitories project again, and I'm trying to make it a regular thing. I know I should have done it in 2019, and I was too late with this video to do it in 2020 as well, so a lot happened, and the research for these videos and the story planning for the webcomic took so damn long. But I'm back now, and I'm not going to stop doing charity live streams until I've restored my reputation as captain of the Pirates of the West, so keep an eye out for me. But yeah, point is, I like designing stories and games, and I also don't think we need intellectual property, so I made a webcomic to prove it. Click the link in the description, read it, share it, re-upload it, make money off of it. It's all public domain. I wrote with the Kraken's ink, and now I forsake my creations to the sea itself, because not only do I think we don't need intellectual property, not only do I think creators will still be able to profit, and not only do I think they will prevent abuse like we talked about in the last video, I'm going to convince you why Zero IP also creates a world where popular games like Breath of the Wild never stop getting new content and get refined every year, where popular media you love is always being refined and improved, where studios, artists, and animators can more easily get jobs or make names names for themselves. It's a world where medical science is led by companies with reputations for creating cures and treatments as fast and as effectively as possible. And above all, a world where accessing all of this is easy, convenient, and where it's not cheap, it's free. And that sounds crazy. So let's get started. So profiting without IP, there's actually a number of different ways, but I do want to stress that these are only theories to cover most products that most people want. The bottom line is this: getting rid of IP doesn't mean people no longer want $100 million Marvel movies or any other IP-reliant thing that's proved popular. This means there's still money to be made, and it's just a question of how to monetize it. This is the same for basically any question you can ask about zero IP, and I really only think it's a matter of time for any edge case. Half the goal of this video is to show you how flexible this is. If people want it, people who want money are going to keep looking for ways to provide it. I mean, we worked out how to monetize court proceedings, and when we started running out of oil we could pump up and the price went up, we started getting out of sand? Say what you want about people who want money, but they are relentless. That said, I think the monetization method for what IP protects that makes the most sense is actually the simplest. As a creator, your profits will come from production rather than distribution, which isn't special or complicated. All we're doing is changing the point of purchase from before seeing to before release. In fact, we already do this. For example, this already happens on a small scale with art commissions. If I pay an artist for work, they set the price at a point above where it's worth their time for the price, but below the point I choose another artist. And while art is copyrighted, this monetization method is totally irrelevant to copyright. The copyright doesn't belong to the artist, it belongs to the one who paid to produce it, but the artist still profited anyway. And I, as the commissioner, can't steal the art I want with the lack of copyright because the art I want doesn't exist yet. That's why I'm paying for production. So if people want $100 million Marvel movies, why couldn't they just pay before it's produced or even released rather than paying before they watch it through a theater or streaming service? Keep in mind, without licensing fees, actually seeing it in theaters or streaming it after it's produced would cost like nothing, and if you legally pirate, that's a sentence, it's free. But I digress. It's not just small scale. This model works on big scale and effectively already happens with crowdfunding such as Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and monthly payment schemes like Patreon. The only difference in how it would work is that the goal would be increased from what is needed to make it to include the profit margin that the creators are willing to make it for. And it's not unreasonable to think consumers would pay this. Like, okay, the budget for Avengers Endgame was $356 million. The second highest crowdsource was a video game called Star Citizen at $300 million. If crowdsourcing can reach that when it's not even the main or even a prominent way we create or pay for media right now, imagine the heights it could reach in a world where the popularity of media has exploded because actually accessing media is convenient and costs near nothing, if not nothing, and where, and this is the big one, everyone is engaged in crowdsourcing because it's the biggest, perhaps only deciding factor of how much and what kinds of new media there will be to access in future. See, the $300 million Star Citizen earned was over 7 years, but this is my point. It's not that people aren't willing to give money to something that doesn't exist or isn't fully realized at the time, it's just that crowdsourcing isn't necessary enough for production for most people to know about or use it, so it takes ages to get potential backers. I can't give you raw numbers about who knew about what at what time, but I can show you that there's a huge difference in media presence between crowdsourcing and current payment models. Star Citizen's YouTube channel has only 400k subs, and its biggest video, a trailer, has 2 million views. Avengers Endgame trailer has 140 million views. If crowdsourcing almost raised the budget of Avengers Endgame off of such a small amount of awareness, imagine how much it could pay for in pure profits with over 140 million views of awareness. It's not that crowdsourcing can't pay for our media, it's just that not enough people engage with it yet because the market isn't forced to use it. Only 17 million people use or have ever used Kickstarter, but around 246 million in the US alone went to theaters in 2016. So if theaters cost near nothing without licensing, but those same people suddenly couldn't see anything in the theaters, they will go to crowdsourcing. When people can't get something they want in the same way, they'll change how they buy it to get it. That's what happened with Amazon and other delivery services during COVID. Did people just give up on non-essential shopping during lockdown, or even just wait a couple of months? Or did Amazon double their profits? Or how about piracy? When streaming became too expensive and too inconvenient for many people, did they just give it up? Or did BitTorrent go up for the first time since 2012? If you just go to Kickstarter and scroll through projects right now, there are loads of things that get funded and rake in thousands, some even millions that you've never heard of, and loads of them blow past their funding to reach the stretch goals, which aren't even the product themselves, they're add-ons. So if the goal itself was the point where the production became profitable and simultaneously the point where the consumers are actually going to get the product they were paying for in the first place, presumably they'll fund it. Another thing worth noting is that the number of backers for these projects is tiny. The first funding goal for Star Citizen was $2 million with just 34,000 backers. When you look at similar projects, each backer is donating an average of about $50 to $80, which is way more than a movie ticket, but that makes sense. When you back a project, you aim to make a tangible difference to the project you're really interested in, and in exchange, you get to consume all the media you weren't as interested in for almost, if not free, because it was funded by others who are more invested. So it's not like media would become more expensive, people will spend more on what they do pay, but less on everything else. And I get it right, crowdsourcing feels very different and weird compared to how we usually pay for things, but is crowdsourcing really that different to what we do currently? The fact that you're paying for the same thing as others, or that you're relying on everyone else paying as well, isn't as rare as you think. If everyone in the world except you stopped wanting to go on cruises, would cruise companies still run the boat just for you, or would they sell or repurpose it? Likewise, if every cruise ship was getting booked out, companies would make another cruise ship because they think everyone, not just you, will buy the tickets, which will retroactively fund and make it profitable. The same logic works for tours and tour guides, or even couriers or posts that go by plane or ship. They wouldn't happen if only one person in the world was paying the plane to ship their one package, unless that one person can somehow make up the profits of the people who used to make that plane or ship profitable. Just like crowdsourcing, your individual payment doesn't guarantee you the product. The only other difference I can think of is that if you don't pay, you sometimes still get the product, but I don't think that's a problem. The more projects you are interested in fail, the more the lack of movies gives you the craving for them, the more likely you will be to push yourself and others to participate. So at a certain point, it hits an equilibrium. People won't just let something they love die because they suddenly don't have to pay the amount that they were already willing to pay to watch that type of media. If a project isn't going to get funded without you, you kind of do have to pay to watch it, just like before. And the closer that countdown gets to zero without being funded, the more likely you are to pay. And because profits are encapsulated within the funding goal, there's not a problem if consumers get lazy with funding after the goal is reached. This isn't a charity. The goal is your profits. If you hit the goal, you already achieved your desired profits for your time to be worthwhile. Now, am I saying you'd see $2 billion crowdsourcing goals for the release of the latest Marvel movie to hit the same profit margins? Honestly, I'd say it'd be less, because with IP, as we've covered, you can massively overinflate your prices, but the maths does check out. Crowdsourcing has shown it's possible to raise about 1/7 of that with only a fraction of the media presence. It's definitely possible we'd not only see $2 billion crowdsourcing goals, but they'd be achieved as well. Again, all we're doing is moving the point of purchase from before watching to before release. The only difference I can think of is the time between paying and accessing it, which we know isn't a problem for consumers because of that Amazon example, as shipping takes longer than buying directly. And also, weddings, tickets to games, and concerts, etc. are all paid for up to years in advance despite being so common. But even then, for big companies, it may be a reliable strategy to produce most, if not all of the media first, and then have a pure profit goal for its release, because people may pay more if it's coming out as soon as the goal is reached. Companies would wager with their consumers how much they're willing to pay to get as soon as possible. If it fails to reach the goal, they'll have to repeatedly drop their price until it succeeds, or hope it reaches funding over a longer period, knowing that if the hype drops too far, or if it takes so long to release that consumers get frustrated with the price and it breeds competitors, they won't be able to get their money. This also helps to avoid new creators underselling their media. I think the industry standard would be to set your goal very high and base your release point, or whether or not you produce it at all, based on what you get. If it's worth it, you can tap out early. And of course, all this applies to patents, applications, technology, and medical science as well. If the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge can raise $150 million when it was just a charity with a marketing gimmick, I think you'd see companies investing a decent chunk into advertising to bring people into objective-based funding, like find a new method for this, or create a cheaper this, and assemble crack teams of scientists and engineers in an attempt to build reputation to better advertise and fund bigger, more marketable projects like find a cure for this. Applications like video editors would advertise features they could release or develop, and we might even just see monthly payment models to pay research teams. You can't tell me people with diabetes wouldn't take the money saved from non-price gouged insulin and push it into a research team that can sell itself to them as the most likely to find a cure, which I think is particularly great because those teams then now have a monetary incentive to keep them updated on their progress and how they're spending their time and money. There's a level of peace of mind you don't get from drug companies like Atlantis, who might put more effort into making changes than patenting whatever bullshit that might be useful in future rather than actually improving the product. And this isn't even the only way drug companies in particular could profit, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to media. What's great about this model, unlike IP, is that production companies are policed by what another can do better. You can't overcharge your profits because it increases the chances of another offering the same project for less, but you have the power to increase your profit margins based on how much people want to see you create it. So if your production group invested a little to put out a good teaser to show show off what you can do, or maybe it has a good reputation for being fast and high quality, then it can set a higher goal. And that's especially important when it comes to continuation and innovation. When you're being paid for production, you've not only already been paid for what's now copyable, but customers will pay the original creator for future projects because the original creator is most likely going to give them what they want. So if you've created something people love, whether it be cool world building or good writing or deep characters or good mechanics, and people paid for its production in the past, it's not typically viable for another company to take that to start a new project based on it, because there's nothing to say that the person who didn't create it will do as well as the original. It's 1977, it's a zero IP world, Star Wars has just been released, it's a big hit, and a bunch of other competitors are asking for money to create a sequel. But then George comes along after getting a feel for the success and sets an appropriate goal for a sequel. Who are consumers paying? Of course, they're paying George. And they wouldn't just be paying him because they want to support the original creator. They'd be paying him because he's most likely to produce a sequel just like the movie he just made. Arguably, you wouldn't even get competitors this early because of that. The only instance where you could make money piggybacking off someone else like this is if you produce something that sold the merits of your production team and what they create rather than the original creator. That, or the creator started to fail at producing what customers wanted or massively overcharged. I mean, without IP, do you really think people would be like, oh, George R.R. Martin set up the goal to release his final book after 10 years, but nah, I don't care, all the imitations have satisfied me. Of course not. That's why black market fanfiction of planned sequels are hard to find, even though writing costs nothing to make and you can actually make profits off of fanfiction if you're below the radar. I'm really sorry to the people I had to show on screen to make that point. You may now be on the radar. What I'm saying is that there's no demand. The Google search terms for sequels to Song of Ice and Fire books are non-existent, although there are one or two with a small amount of views, but it's tiny compared to when people actually search for fanfiction, because they are searching for something the author won't do, not what they plan to. This is why I think even if you screwed up your marketing or you have something that's popularity could only be realized after it's released, it's not a big deal. Most projects can to some extent be continued to be developed by the original creator, whether it be sequels for movies or books or patches for games to add new content or improve designs. Hell, you could even improve a book or movie after its release, but we'll talk about that in a second, and why zero IP is so good for that. Even beyond that, there's a demand to see what a successful creator does next, even if it's not based off a previous production. Just look at the hype around Kojima, even when he's not making Metal Gear. I mean, his name and others are frequently used in marketing for a reason. And even then, this is all hardly a negative to begin with. It's more like an incomparable. Because when you're paid by production rather than distribution, you get paid up front, which isn't just a bonus in itself, it also means you get paid for the next project up front too. So if your first project blows past expectations, you get paid based on that immediately from the second project. And keep in mind, you're paid based on the value of the first project even if the second project isn't as good. So while you may be underpaid for the first project, chances are you'll be overpaid for the second project or at some other point down the line. When everyone's profiting by production, you do as a creator get rewarded for your hard work. Even if what consumers liked is a tiny part of what you release and the rest of it is terrible, it opens up opportunities for you to be hired to do exactly what you were good at and advertised as such to boost faith in production. The interesting thing about upfront payment models is it completely changes how creators will sell and how people will buy, and I don't think people account for that. There's a reason why big upfront purchases like cars and jewelries have warranties and amazing customer service. When creators are forced onto risky upfront payment models, consumers being able to trust them becomes a huge factor to ensure that their money isn't wasted. Often with our current model, the IP is vastly more important than who's making it, and that gets abused. So while you might think that no one cares about the director or writer or even costume designer, without IP, consumers will start paying way more attention to who's producing because they can waste money on unreliable upfront payments. Creators who can show their past achievements will be way more valuable and can earn much more, just as other brands ride or die based on their integrity. But we'll talk about that more in a moment. The great thing about creators transferring all their profits from distribution to production is that they don't lose money if someone copy and pastes their work. They only lose money if they begin to fail the consumers who are paying them to produce. Is that not the perfect compromise between creators and consumers? Creators and companies still profit based on how good they are at their job, but if you hate that a certain creator or company treats its story or universe terribly, you don't just have to take it. This model will create swaths of new companies and creators looking to do it better. And that's another bonus. I talk about compromise between creators and consumers, but that's just for already successful creators that have total control of an established work. But for anyone new to the industry, zero IP is a serious upgrade for the vast majority of them, especially small creators. I'd be lying if I told you that IP laws give the few creators who make it big a greater security to profit than without. But the flip side of this is that you're giving them extra profits at the expense of both the consumer and all the creators who haven't made it big yet. Much like how YouTubers make names for themselves by piggybacking on other content to build their audience with fair use content, think about the opportunities Zero IP would create for artists, filmmakers, and programmers to make money and build a following. Fans of works who know the community well could ask for profits for small jobs to improve bigger existing works. Fans don't like the Colossal Titan being CGI in Attack on Titan? Oh, pay me, I'll replace it frame by frame. My favorite adaptation had a fight scene I was looking forward to, terribly animated. A smaller team or even just an individual would show a sample of what it would look like and replace it for a profit goal. Games like Breath of the Wild would have new content every year based on what creators could sell you on, and if there's still demand for the convenience of a console, Nintendo can still make profits by making a sequel and incorporate all of the new content themselves. Since those small creators have already profited on production, they haven't lost anything, and a sequel will just drive more people to funding their future projects. Imagine a world where animators, artists, audio engineers, songwriters, and programmers could make bank redoing small parts of existing works. Better animation, better fight scenes, better backgrounds, better audio, better soundtracks. You could even rehire certain actors to do certain scenes, and successful improvements just become part of the most popular version of the work that gets shared. And because of that, when you prove yourself on a small scale, you're way more likely to be picked up by a big production team for more money because they can advertise you and your work for greater profits. After all, many backers have probably seen your work before, even if you're small. Like, oh shit, it's the guy/team who did that. They just need it to be pointed out to them by the company. This is the great thing about having consumers way more involved in production. There's way more leverage for artists. When the first season of One Punch Man came out and it became famous for its animation, imagine what consumers would have paid to get that team of animators back together for season 2. Imagine how far studios would have gone to not only get those animators on their funding page, but advertise why you want those animators as well. Instead, you got this, and the animators and director moved on to different projects with less demand because they weren't getting paid extra, nor was any attempt made to sign them on as early as possible. Why? Because the production committee, the rights holders and investors that chose a new studio and was responsible for their budget and deadlines, knew that people would watch One Punch Man Season 2 regardless because it was called One Punch Man Season 2 and they were the only ones allowed to make One Punch Man Season 2. This isn't even the first time that's happened. And that's not all. There are small artists out there even willing to do incredible things like animating sections of Harry Potter audiobooks.
Right, you've got a wonky sort of cross, he said, consulting Unfogging the Future. That means you're going to have trials and suffering. Sorry about that. But there's a thing that could be the sun. Hang on, that means great happiness. So you're going to suffer, but be very happy. You need your inner eye testing if you ask me, said Ron.
Now imagine if they were allowed to get paid for it. Do you want an animated Harry Potter adaptation? Hell, do you want multiple? Do you have a favorite franchise that just stopped getting produced or never reached its full potential? Abolishing intellectual property is the most efficient and reliable way to get it, and it gives tons of small creators and teams a chance to profit and grow that they did not have before. A lot of people talk about small creators not being able to make money without IP, but fail to take into account that not only would they still profit, not only would the lack of IP overall create a huge amount of new jobs and opportunities for more artists that didn't have before and arguably raise the potential amount paid to them, but also, with only one notable exception, IP is useless to small creators anyway. One of the greatest flaws of the ethical argument for IP is that it doesn't apply equally. I mean, even just for what it's currently designed to protect, IP doesn't apply equally. As a small creator, if someone uses your copyright, the law doesn't magically evaporate them. You can't call the police on them, you have to sue them. And you can't sue someone as a small artist, that requires money. Potentially more money than the lawsuit is even worth. The only time it works is when it prevents big companies doing big infringements on things like adaptions of small artist work, because then the payout is big enough and reliable enough for lawyers to take on a percentage of the payout. But for smaller instances like t-shirt printing businesses or even just art re-uploading on the internet, copyright doesn't do shit. Even if a company caves under media pressure, you don't get any money back from their profits and the site just goes back up later anyway. Meanwhile, big companies like Disney are constantly suing merchandise companies and has the weight to pressure social media and platforms like YouTube to do something or get money from copyright infringers, even when it's fair use.
In the past, I have had big videos like Wipe It Like It's Hot, where I go into the fucking bathroom and play... Look, I'm playing Drop It Like It's Hot on a paper towel dispenser. Guess who fucking claimed that? Music industries, motherfucker.
This is why artists still use watermarks. That's why they get money up front on commissions or send you low-res versions before finalizing payment. Because if you steal their art, they can't do anything. Copyright be damned. I mean, I've talked to some of these artists for videos about times the stuff got stolen for t-shirt stores that try to like sponsor me and stuff. Only one even did DMCA claims, and that was because she ran a business. Because it's not only a full-time job in itself to do DMCA claims, it doesn't even work half the time, because the DMCA's target the web host rather than the website, so it only works if the host is within a country that has DMCA laws. And there are specifically web host services that advertise themselves as being offshore and ignoring DMCAs, which you'll notice giant companies and only giant companies actually have the ability to pull down. Even on big, well-known sites like YouTube, there are too many DMCAs, so they have to create systems for users to handle it themselves, which if you keep going back and forth, still end up in the threat of a court battle, which only one of these two players can afford. The vast majority of small creators already function like they don't have IP, it's just that everyone else does, so they don't get any of the benefits I talked about, like being able to build off of the works of big companies. I mean, fan art is literally illegal because of copyright, and you get nothing in return for that sacrifice. But despite the lack of copyright enforcement to protect small creators, on places like Twitter, small artists still thrive. They still make money despite the blatant copyright infringement that exists everywhere. Many even upload high-res images without watermark. How is that? It'd be because they're profiting from one or more of commissions, jobs behind the scenes, or from a Patreon or Ko-fi, otherwise known as they're paid for production. Exactly how I've been saying all creators should be earning. But this isn't the only way IP doesn't apply equally. Oh no, the biggest ethical problem with IP is its consistency. If you have an ethical innate right to an idea, then it should apply to every idea, not just a few. There is nothing in the ethical argument for IP that defines the difference between a piece of art or an invention and everything from food innovation to even knots, management workflow designs, and concepts for apps like ride sharing. People came up with these ideas with the labor of their mind just as any other. If you argue we have rights to the labors of our mind, then you also have to agree to expand intellectual property's reach. Now, if you want to live in a world where there's only one bubble tea store and one ride-sharing app and they both price gouge you, rarely innovate, and provide terrible service just because it's a right, be my guest. But I think a right is just a rule everyone in society agrees should apply to them equally if they want to continue living there happily. The real question we should be asking is how much power do we want to give companies at the expense of the consumer? Honestly, I think people who are okay with IP already kind of get that there's no clear-cut right, because IP and the way people interact with it already demonstrates that the potential abuse outweighs the moral desire for it to be a right. Most people will talk about IP like there's no ethical difference between copyright and property rights, but fail to take into account that property rights are forever. If you own a car or a house or even a mug, it's yours for life, and when you die, it's passed on to someone of your choosing. But you would seldom find someone who thinks Disney's extension of the time limit on copyright is okay, nor would you find someone who thinks insulin or any other life-saving drug should stay with one company for even 20 years as it is currently, let alone forever. People already believe that their desire to have rights over their own ideas can be outweighed by the abuse they would have to live under should everyone else have those same rights. Almost no one believes in an innate right to an idea, they just believe it's a necessary evil to have some power over an idea. So I don't know, I think a right isn't as much an innate or God-given, it's a social contract. It's what we can agree to guarantee to each other. So whether or not IP is a right is more about if we can get people to agree to give it up for what they were getting out of that in return, rather than something untouchable or unmalleable. Anyway, we're getting philosophical now, let's get back to practical. Back to the small artists who don't really use copyright. There are two good questions. One, even if small artists are only protected from big companies with big infringement cases, isn't that enough justification for its existence? And two, how are small artists still able to make a name for themselves when their work can just be re-uploaded? And this plays into another fallacy about IP. The lack of IP doesn't mean the loss of ethics. Take for instance the Sony PS4 winter lineup music video. Sony puts out a trailer to advertise their game. This video has segments of original animation, except it's not original. All of the movements was plagiarized from everything from small independent animators to big companies. Copying animation to this level isn't protected by copyright, which you can tell because no one ever got sued for it despite copying from even big companies. But Sony took down the video and the guy lost his job. What I mean by bringing this up is just because it's legal to steal media doesn't mean that people are suddenly okay with stealing media. In fact, while I don't have numbers for these specific artists, there are loads of examples of Twitter exposing art thieves that get tons of retweets and give the original creators a boost. There's even a rare couple of YouTube examples, with some victims having way more subs now than they did back then. Anyway, the point of the animation tracing example was that even when copyright isn't a factor, consumers still care about copying and plagiarism. And that's great, because it means there's demand for ethics in media. And that effect is amplified by the total removal of copyright. Here's why. The great thing about not having IP, if someone copies something and consumers deem it to be an unethical copy, there's no reason to support them. Whereas before, with IP, consumers had to choose between their morals and getting to watch their favorite property. Without IP, a company with better ethics can replicate the same product to fulfill the demand. So if a company or creator is known for plagiarism or has a project they're currently trying to get funding for that blatantly plagiarizes, another company can offer the exact same same project, but promised to pay a percentage to the victim of plagiarism. Assuming the new company was good enough to replicate the same product, they would still be making money they wouldn't be otherwise, so why wouldn't they so long as there's demand? I bet it would become an industry standard for adaptions to advertise how much is going back to the original creator in order to compete with other adaptions. And this extends to other ways creators can still profit, which we'll talk about now. So although profits at production is the main way and most guaranteed way to earn without IP, there are others. Firstly, you can still make money at distribution. After media is produced, you still need to watch it or play it. So movie theaters and online services still exist to compile, stream, project, and run the service to hold all the media. They'll all compete with each other and get paid through advertisements or small monthly fees. It's just like streaming now, except they have free access to the same stuff and carry high demand, if not all the stuff, and they have to compete on literally anything else. Firstly, it's quite possible big media companies like Disney have the money for their own services. Their content is still going to get uploaded to every other service, but if they can match them on distribution, they can still make profits. But could small creators profit from these giant distribution companies? Sure. Again, the lack of IP doesn't mean the loss of ethics. Do companies care about ethics? No. But many consumers do, and so that is a demand for companies to fulfill for profit. Just like how you see some big art sharing accounts always credit, you'd absolutely see some distribution companies popping up with higher monthly fees for the same content so that they can work with creators to get some of the profits to them depending on the views they bring in. I was going to use businesses donating to charity as an example of this, but I'm pretty sure they do that because it's a tax exemption. The better example is probably with animals. They're a living being, but they don't have the same rights to what they create, unlike people with IP. So like, chicken farmers don't have to pay back to the chickens. And yet, you can still get free-range eggs that take up a large portion of shelves. Although part of that is apparently the taste, but there's also things like no animal testing labels with cosmetics. It's a relatively small amount, but you'll notice that there's unquestionably a demand, with Google Trends showing there's a constant flow of people checking certain brands. There's also stuff with workers, like brand milk versus home brand and tipping on rideshare apps. The app doesn't have to give you that option, but they go out of their way to offer it, not because they're nice, but because there's a demand for that option in an app, and another will add it if they don't. I can't say this would necessarily amount to a lot. Again, production is the most reliable way, but I think creators could potentially get a decent amount from distribution services. Also, worth noting, it doesn't cost anything to have a simple comment section that will naturally inform anyone who sees a plagiarized video. But not just that. Distribution platforms naturally lean towards benefiting creators anyway. Why? Because the creator has the first move advantage. This is the third way of profiting. It means that because they have the media before it's released, they decide where it goes first, and that can be capitalized on for extra profits. This is the reason I'm not worried about other teams jumping in to take small creators' crowdsourcing projects before they finish getting funded. If, say, you have the idea to fix the CGI Titans in Attack on Titan, you don't disclose that immediately. First, you create examples and assets to prove what you can do, and then you release. Even if you're a big company, to compete with that Kickstarter, you have to both discover the project before it gains too much and then create those same assets to compete. Not particularly viable, especially as a big company. Working overtime to get those assets out isn't efficient just to take a small team's profits. Even if you use advertising to pull ahead, you then have to make the advertising and make it good, and all of that's really getting expensive. I think this strategy is really only viable if your reputation alone allows you to compete with the assets already out, and or the other project has a vulnerability or is ethically exploitable, like I said before. Technically, you can rip the assets to start your own project and then use an advertising budget to pull ahead, but keep in mind that this is a violation of fraud law. What's the difference between fraud law and copyright? Well, the great thing about fraud law is that it can only be filed by the consumer, not a company. If consumers feel like they've been lied to, there's grounds for a class action lawsuit or to file a complaint through consumer law. This is actually like the main argument against trademarks, the form of IP I haven't really talked about, but can actually cause abuse if you look into it. The fact is, we already have law to prevent tricking consumers. You really don't need trademarks so that the consumers can identify you. It's small, but you're still giving business unnecessary power. Also, it's against the interest of crowdsourcing websites to advertise misleading pages, and you'd expect a certain websites would gain reputations for the best possible methods to ensure backers' money is used reliably as possible. Like, for example, I bet crowdsourcing websites would give options for how money is released to the creator. If you're a creator and you're working against other creators who can replicate you, it'd be more trustworthy to set your money to a slow release so backers can get a chance to see your progress and retract their money if you're not what you cut yourself out. Something I didn't mention about the whole Star Citizen thing is that it and a lot of other Kickstarters often waste, pocket, or otherwise misuse funds, and sometimes production takes forever. But I think this is actually a result of intellectual property. After all, this doesn't happen with small artists with commissions, despite getting paid up front. nor does it happen in other industries where it's a standard. Their integrity is more valuable to them than what they get from abusing a customer who's already paid, and I think that's because, as I've covered, they don't use copyright. I think crowdsourcers would be nowhere near as likely to do this if another can replicate the entire project, and when you take into account slow release payment models, they might result in a creator having the rest of their funds taken back, and it might be best as creator to cut your losses and set a new goal, but for the release of all your code and assets to speed up production for the new team. Anyway, I digress. First move advantages. They're pretty normal with non-IP like food and manufacturing. When you're the first to create something, you have a short window of time to provide the cheapest, fastest method of making the product and mass producing it, so as soon as it releases, you keep up with the demand and there's zero weakness for competitors to exploit. You take all the brand recognition for yourself, become synonymous with the product, and as long as you stay ahead in price, quality, and supply, you fulfill the demand so much that competition doesn't have an opening. A great example is Coke. A lot of people think it's due to their secret recipe, but the low price, this is through inflation, insane quality assurance,
CO2 will appear down here.
Two of the tests are for CO2 levels and sweetness, which is measured in a unit called Brix. The finished Coca-Cola beverage is about 10% sweetener. This batch passes the test.
and the fact that the formula has been used and seemingly unchanged for over 100 years and hasn't been replicated indicates that no one reverse engineers it simply because it's not worth it to compete. When I was talking about the other way for medical science and technology teams to profit, this was what I was talking about. I think you'd find the best manufacturing companies teaming up with production teams to corner the market. You combine that with an investor to fund research, and it's quite reasonable to profit from medical innovation without crowdsourcing. Again, there is demand. Even if whether your investment is worth it is a gamble, that's what business does. It takes risks for more money. It's not even just Coke or manufacturers. We can actually see the effect of the first move advantage in some games where the main cause of the game's popularity isn't IP reliant. I don't think anyone would dispute that Minecraft's success came from its mechanics rather than its visuals, but those mechanics aren't copyrightable, which you can tell because Hytale exists, which if you don't know is effectively being hyped up by the fans as Minecraft 2. But Hytale took like 8 years to be announced and probably only happened as a result of a number of mistakes made by Microsoft after they bought Minecraft out. Before this, there were a ton of games that tried to jump on the Minecraft hype train and borrowed a lot of mechanics with their own unique twists, but no one tried to flat out make a competitor to Minecraft, or at least if they did, they tried and they failed, which is my point. And they couldn't do it despite the fact that Minecraft had a tiny team and became popular in its alpha phase. There was absolutely an opportunity for a big company to beat them on their own product, but no one had their brand recognition or a way to exploit their ethics. So whether it's a crowdsourcing page or something in its early development and releasing a bit at a time, you're not vulnerable unless you actually fail your consumers. Because in contrast, there's examples I can point to like Yandere Simulator, which can and were replicated within 2 weeks, but it took years of failed development and ethical controversy before it even got to that point. Even the few examples of Game of Thrones sequel fanfiction is probably only a result of the actual book taking 9 years to come out, and those examples were near non-existent anyway. By the way, gonna mention this because it tripped me up too. Coke formula is technically a form of IP, however a trade secret only protects something like the Coke formula from anyone who can be proven to have received the secret recipe from the company or an employee breaking contract. It doesn't prevent reverse engineering, so while it's IP, it's really not the ban on replication that I said creates the abuse in the previous video, which you can tell because trade secrets are allowed to exist for like literally forever. Anyway, back to creators making money on distribution platforms via first move advantage. Think about how on YouTube, generally speaking, someone who re-uploads your video does not get anywhere near the number of views unless they change the thumbnail and title to something more clickable or otherwise change the marketing, as is the case with all 3 examples of successful plagiarism on YouTube you can really find. Not that successful, they all caved and deleted anyway because of the whole ethics thing from before, but still. There's more examples if you change the language of the video, but I'm not going to count those because it's like a completely separate audience. When you plagiarize to the same audience with the same marketing, there's no good examples. I've actually seen a couple of attempts myself because of the YouTube Studio, but you never encounter them without. See, there's so few successful plagiarism on YouTube because when the first video is uploaded, more people are guaranteed to have clicked on and watched that video than when the second video is uploaded. Therefore, those same people won't click on it again or watch it for as long. So according to the algorithm, the second similar video is a bad video and doesn't get promoted. If you assume that most video services will lean towards user-uploaded content to keep up with the sheer amount of content that's now copyright-free and use a monetary incentive to upload like YouTube, creators will be rewarded anyway, just like YouTubers. I mean, all my videos are now public domain, but just you watch. I will always have the most views. Or if you assume specific niche video services want to be the first place people can go to see content from that specific niche, then distributors have a direct incentive to interact with and reward the original creative to get that first move advantage. Also, if a project is an adaptation of something plagiarized and is already out and earning money through distribution, nothing stops the victim of plagiarism also uploading the same thing and being like, watch their project through me to support the original creator, and hopefully using that ethical boost to compete in the algorithm by using external clicks on social media. So that's a pretty hilarious idea. Even for things incredibly easy to rip, like videos and live streams, getting creators on your side just to tell their audience where exactly their product is coming out first is very enticing in an advertising sense. It's not going to be much money as compared to exclusive, but it's something, and as I say, most of your profits come from production anyway. That said, for things like movies that come out in theaters and video games, they're a lot harder to simply copy and re-upload on your own distribution platform, so it might be possible that you're waiting a couple of months for it to properly come out elsewhere, and What's the matter, Unique? Tell them they won't get exclusive licenses if you polish IP. Go on, tell them! Okay, so yes, it's possible movies will do exclusive deals with single theaters, and games will be loaded with code to prevent copying and do exclusive deals with single game stores to try and control their media for as long as possible. But okay, one, if you're getting paid purely through distribution, you're taking an insane risk with copyright gone. If you get leaked or hacked or anything before release, you can't DMCA anymore, and your released work can go through any legal channel of distribution without threat of infringement. You have no control over what gets leaked, and you could lose all your potential profits from years of work. This isn't a risk with production model because you get paid up front, and just like with small artists, you don't betray your customers paying up front because you want to secure the highest funds possible for the upfront payment on the next project, which is highly dependent on your integrity because it is an upfront payment. Even if you're producing most or all of a product and then doing a crowdfund for its release, it's still nowhere near as risky as having to send out a file for a movie to thousands of your theaters globally and hoping not a single one of them breaks ranks for multiple weeks and months. And the same to video games where each customer is a potential cracker. And you don't want white people playing your games. I'm sorry. I was trying to avoid jokes like that to expand this video's reach, but I had to. It's fine. This video's public domain, just cut that part out and re-upload it to wherever you want. If you're crowdfunding for a release point, you can wait till the money has been locked in before you finish or record the last small but crucial scenes, or you can store parts of the project in different places with different people so that you have contingencies if something is leaked and you don't lose all your leverage in one go. But if you profit from distribution, you're forced to have the whole project completed and ready before you even make a single cent. It's a huge risk, and that's not all, because number two, in spite of any DRM, while it may be hard for another company to replicate them, it's not literally illegal, which means all the difference because now supply and demand actually works. Try as hard as you can with as much money as you want to control your media, but the more you try to charge customers and the more they want what they have to go to you to get, the more demand and money is to be made in cracking it, emulating it, or recording it on a camera in high enough quality, or whatever method they find next to make it watchable. With piracy now legal, there's a genuine business to be made in cracking and recording jobs, and it's hard to tell what will be invented in future to meet that demand as fast as possible. It actually works out to be a nice equilibrium. Small indie games might be able to get a small profit for a long time until they get big enough to deserve a crack, just like how you're more likely to have to pay for an OnlyFans account while they're small because they haven't been illegally re-uploaded, as porn sites are less policed for copyright. I swear I learned this factoid in research phase. Meanwhile, bigger games have a shorter window before they get cracked because there's more demand for them to be cracked, but they have a much larger concentration of people willing to buy it day one. This is what I meant by indefinite abuse in the previous video. Without IP, there's a pretty definite period before something is replicated that limits the amount of abuse. The less you charge, the longer you'll be able to profit from it because there's less demand for people to crack it. But the more you charge, the more demand there is for a crack, and it'll attract more and higher profile crackers using the same production-based profit method. It's also worth knowing this strategy is a risk if you're making money from production model as well. If you don't promise to release your game or movie without exclusivity, you're at the whim of a company that will make the same movie or game as you, but with that promise included. We might only rarely see this strategy just because of that. I could see some games or movies promise to release without exclusivity as a profit stretch goal. At a certain point, they're not going to have control of their product anyway. You might as well sell their option while you can guarantee profit for it, rather than risking how quickly it could get cracked, leaked, or cam recorded. Hell, I mean, like, what if games promise to go open source as a stretch goal? What if production companies just released all of their assets clean as a stretch goal? They make money, and it would do wonders for what happens happens with the product in future, and it adds to a huge number of resources new creators could use to make production cheaper and faster. And I think that's about all I got. So to sum up, creators can profit through production and distribution with ethics or first move advantage. Consumers can get better products, better companies, more convenience, and cheap if not free access to everything, and creators get way more opportunity to make money and better leverage for positions. And none of this or the previous video even address or make a big point of people's usual and more well-known concerns with intellectual property, like Disney expanding the copyright limit every time the mouse is near public domain, or refusing to allow Spider-Man to be placed on a child's grave, or how about the right to repair movement, where companies like Apple force you to get your phone or computers repaired in their official stores because they police the copyright on their blueprint and make and patent special screws and parts just to prevent third-party manufacturers making them and third-party repair stores getting a hold of them. What about the content claim abuse on YouTube? All of these problems would of course simply just disappear without intellectual property. To tell the truth though, I don't even think I need to make a big deal of these. My job here was to give you the framework to understand the problem, and then the solution. Do you know what is meant when people say high seas? It means international waters, the area outside of any country's law. If you didn't get the point of the name, it's the area where intellectual property doesn't exist. And to me, that's symbolic. See, even if I didn't convince you here, I firmly believe these videos will stick in your mind. And every time you see something trashy from these companies, you're gonna understand why. And step by step, you're gonna be drawn to me. First a toe, then a foot, and one by one you'll get your feet wet until you're knee-deep into the shallows and the sirens begin to call you back to the rock you call safety. But it won't work. Welcome to the high sea.